Jean-Jacques Rousseau was born in 1712 in Geneva, a small but politically independent city-state shaped by Protestant discipline, civic pride, and strict moral codes. His birth was marked by tragedy. His mother died shortly after delivering him, an event that haunted Rousseau throughout his life and shaped his emotional world. His father, a watchmaker with a volatile temperament, raised him in an atmosphere of affection mixed with instability. Rousseau's early years were defined by reading novels, classical histories, and religious texts, experiences that fostered imagination but left him poorly prepared for structured social life. Rousseau's childhood lacked consistency and security. His father eventually fled Geneva after a legal dispute, leaving Rousseau effectively abandoned. He was placed in the care of relatives and later apprenticed to a tradesman, a situation he deeply resented. Feeling misunderstood and mistreated, Rousseau ran away as a teenager, beginning a life of wandering, dependency, and emotional vulnerability. These early experiences instilled in him a persistent sense of alienation and distrust toward authority, institutions, and social expectations. During his travels, Rousseau converted from Protestantism to Catholicism under the influence of Madame de Warens, who became both his patron and emotional anchor. She supported him financially and intellectually, encouraging his education in music, philosophy, and literature. Despite this stability, Rousseau struggled with feelings of inadequacy and dependence. He oscillated between gratitude and resentment, intimacy and withdrawal, patterns that would later dominate his relationships and reinforce his growing suspicion of others' intentions. Rousseau eventually settled in Paris, where he entered the intellectual world of the Enlightenment. He befriended prominent figures such as Denis Diderot and contributed articles on music and political theory to major encyclopedic projects. At first, Rousseau appeared aligned with the Enlightenment's faith in progress, reason, and social reform. Yet beneath the surface, he felt increasingly uneasy. He believed that modern society, far from improving humanity, corrupted natural goodness and fostered inequality, competition, and hypocrisy. Rousseau's intellectual breakthrough came with his first major success, the Discourse on the Sciences and Arts, in which he argued that cultural progress had weakened morality rather than strengthened it. This claim shocked the intellectual establishment and brought him sudden fame. Rousseau embraced the role of outsider, presenting himself as a truth-teller opposed to fashionable opinion. However, this newfound attention intensified his sensitivity to criticism and planted the seeds of paranoia that would later dominate his life. As Rousseau's ideas developed, his relationships deteriorated. He quarreled with former friends, interpreting disagreement as betrayal. He withdrew from Parisian society, adopting a simpler lifestyle and rejecting social conventions. His suspicion deepened into a belief that others were conspiring against him, misrepresenting his ideas, or seeking to control him. These fears were not entirely unfounded, as his writings increasingly attracted hostility from religious and political authorities, but they grew disproportionate and consuming. Rousseau's most influential works, The Social Contract and Emile, published in 1762, solidified both his reputation and his persecution. In The Social Contract, Rousseau argued that legitimate political authority arises from the collective will of the people, not from monarchy or inherited power. In Emile, he challenged traditional education and religious doctrine, advocating for moral development grounded in nature rather than dogma. These ideas alarmed governments and churches alike. Both books were condemned, banned, and publicly burned. Facing arrest, Rousseau fled France, beginning a long period of exile that would dominate the remainder of his life. He moved between Switzerland, Prussia, and England, rarely staying in one place for long. Each refuge eventually became intolerable as Rousseau's mistrust intensified. He believed hosts were spying on him, mocking him, or plotting to silence him. Even those who offered genuine assistance were eventually rejected as enemies. During his exile, Rousseau's psychological state deteriorated. He became increasingly isolated, obsessed with defending his reputation, and preoccupied with imagined persecution. He wrote extensively to justify his actions and explain his suffering, producing autobiographical works such as Confessions, in which he presented his life as a moral testimony. These writings were unprecedented in their emotional exposure, blending self-criticism with self-vindication. Rousseau portrayed himself as both flawed and fundamentally sincere, corrupted not by his nature, but by society's cruelty. Despite his instability, Rousseau's intellectual influence continued to expand. His emphasis on natural goodness, emotional authenticity, and popular sovereignty resonated deeply, particularly among those disillusioned with aristocratic privilege and rigid institutions. His ideas would later inspire revolutionary movements, especially during the French Revolution, though Rousseau himself did not live to see their full impact. Ironically, a thinker who feared society's judgment became one of its most transformative critics. In his final years, Rousseau was allowed to return to France under limited conditions. He lived quietly, writing, copying music, and walking alone. Though less openly persecuted, he remained convinced that he was surrounded by hostility and deception. His paranoia never fully subsided. Yet even in isolation, Rousseau continued to reflect on morality, freedom, and the fragile relationship between the individual and society. Jean-Jacques Rousseau died in 1778 at the age of 66. Shortly after his death, his reputation underwent a dramatic transformation. Once condemned and hunted, he was later celebrated as a visionary and moral reformer. His remains were eventually moved to the Pantheon in Paris, a symbolic recognition denied to him in life. His writings reshaped political theory, education, literature, and the understanding of the self. Rousseau's life stands as a study in contradiction. He championed human freedom while fearing human contact. He exposed the corruption of society while longing for belonging. His paranoia and exile were not separate from his philosophy, but intertwined with it. Rousseau believed that society distorts the self, and his own suffering seemed to confirm this belief. Through isolation and mistrust, he articulated a vision of authenticity that would define modern thought. Jean-Jacques Rousseau is remembered not as a calm system builder, but as a restless and wounded thinker whose ideas emerged from personal conflict and emotional intensity. His exile shaped his philosophy, just as his philosophy deepened his exile, in confronting the tension between individual freedom and social order. Rousseau revealed the psychological cost of modern life and the enduring struggle to remain authentic within it.